On tonight's program, I interview James Perloff. James Perloff is the author of The Shadows of Power and Truth is a Lonely Warrior. On tonight's program, we'll discuss the possible links between President Trump and Zionism. To learn more about James Perloff, visit jamesperloff.com. Please click like on the video, make a comment, subscribe to the channel, and most importantly, enjoy the program. James Perloff, welcome back to the program.
Well, thank you very much, Russell. You've been a generous host to granting me time on your show.
Well, James, you've been on this show. You've had many good things to say about Donald Trump. Now President Trump. He's been president for over 10 days. What are your thoughts on the president's first week and a half in the White House?
Well, I think that there are definitely positives that we can look at, and I do want to say right off the bat that this election was considered by most people in alt media to be a victory, not so much because they were necessarily Trump supporters, but because they were adversaries of Hillary Clinton and the whole Bush-Clinton political machine that's been in place for so long. And of course, it was the establishment's intent to continue by having a Jeb Bush-Hillary Clinton election. That didn't happen. People wised up, and people actually started listening to alt media more than mainstream media. And I think that's the first time that's ever happened in an election year. So I considered it a victory for populism. And I think we see that also reflected in the Brexit vote over in Europe, that there's growing awareness and a rising up against the intentions of the global New World Order. And so I was pleased with the results of the election, even though I, watch any such election result guardedly, and Mr. Trump guardedly. But in terms of what I'm pleased with about Trump is that he has pretty much put the TPP into the toilet, and that was a big project for the establishment, one that Hillary had called the gold standard of trade before she backed off a little bit because of job concerns. And he's also hopefully he'll continue to maintain his commitment to defending the Second Amendment. He said he'll work with Putin, and there's different interpretations that we can put in that, but I consider that a positive. One thing that really has been a very nice surprise is he's spoken to Robert F. Kennedy about the possibility of being on a vaccine task force, which I would love to see, because I certainly regard vaccines as part of the New World Order's plan of population control. And he's also moving toward the repeal of Obamacare. I don't think he's going to push any transgender stuff down our throats. And he's also he's called out mainstream media. I think maybe that's what people like about him the most. No other presidential candidate who had any significant showing in an election has ever even mentioned the phrase mainstream media. And so this was another thing that we've found attractive about him. And of course, he's also moving to restrict immigration, and that's caused a lot of backlash from the media. They continue to attack him, which I think probably speaks in his favor. But obviously, although we are concerned about freedom, we do not want to see happen to America what's happening to Europe right now, with this massive transplantation of violent immigrants changing the whole destiny of Europe right now. They're facing a disaster, and so I do agree with prudent restraints on immigration, and so those are some of the positives that I see from Trump.
Trump has done a lot in his first 10 days. Is it too much, too fast?
I don't know. I mean, there's a lot to be undone, and taking care of TPP and moving Obamacare back. I guess it's gotten his opponents more excited, but I guess you could. One way of looking at it is he's a can-do guy who is not going to spend his time on the golf course, but is going to start getting active right now, fulfilling his pledges. That's okay. I don't mind a guy who works fast, as long as it's not at such a frantic pace that it actually becomes unenforceable and creates chaos.
Well, James, you've been studying President Trump's Zionist connections. If things weren't already bad enough for Trump, now he's a Zionist. But no, he has said he is the most pro-Israel. His policies seem to lean that way. But Trump says it's America first. James, what have you discovered? Is there anything to be concerned about?
Well, definitely. And part of his America first approach that I don't like is his recent insistence that we increase our nuclear weapons and our defense budget. Now, our defense budget at last check was $619 billion. And we actually spend more than the next 8 biggest countries' defense budgets combined. And, who do we have for enemies? Any enemies the United States has right now are people we're provoking. We've been pushing Putin, who is not an aggressor. Let me just state frankly, he's not an aggressor, not in the Ukraine, not in Crimea. He's not pushing us. He's not sending his ships and troops over to the Western Hemisphere like we are putting troops on his border. And as far as the Muslims go, we've been fighting unprovoked wars against them. This depends on your understanding of 9/11 and false flag attacks, but we've been fighting wars that were unprovoked against Islamic countries and creating absolute chaos in Libya, Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq. And we don't need a bigger defense budget. He's talking about the need to repair our infrastructure, which is falling apart. How about cutting back that defense budget? We're spending 10 times what Russia does. And so I don't think we need that. That's one of the points I would disagree with him on. But that does, speaking of defense, does bring us into the subject of Zionism and Israel. And one of the contradictions we'll find with Mr. Trump is that throughout his campaign, he said that our allies must pay for their own defense. But he's not applying that to Israel. Just recently, he said that we must continue to take care of Israel, who is now the recipient of an increased defense package of $38 billion. They've been getting $3 billion a year. And you have to ask, Russell, why do they need more for their defense? Because America's been knocking out their enemies one by one. We've taken care of Afghanistan, took care of Saddam Hussein, turned Iraq into chaos, knocked out Gaddafi, killed Gaddafi, knocked out Libya. We're destroying Syria. We destabilized Egypt. Who do they have left besides Iran? They should need a smaller defense budget in Israel now because America has done all the work for them. And yet he's talking about this need to defend Israel. Well, what's left? I mean, who's threatening Israel? ISIS never goes after them.
That's a good point. Are there, terrorist statements aimed at Israel? Do these things occur? They must.
Well, I'm sure that there are people. We know that there are people who are have their land occupied by the Zionists who resent the Zionists. But as far as terrorism goes, Israel is the number one world sponsor of terrorism. That goes back to the King David bombing in 1946 and the Lavon affair of 1954 and the attack on the USS Liberty in 1967 and the Mossad trick that got us to bomb Libya in 1986 after the La Belle discotheque was bombed, and right up to 9/11, which all the evidence, of course, points overwhelmingly to Israel. And I suggest people go to the WikiSpooks article, Israel Did It, for just a great summary of that evidence. But Israel is the sponsor of terrorism, and I'm certainly not worried about threats to Israel. I'm concerned about their continued growth of their military, their apartheid, their encroachments on other people, their cruelty based on their Talmudic outlook and their racism.
Well, what about the Muslim tide?
Well, there wouldn't be any. There was peace in Jerusalem until the Zionists moved in there. But this is where Trump's Zionist connections come into play, and we should probably talk about that. There was a very good video you can watch on YouTube. Brother Nathaniel is one of my favorites on YouTube. He is, of course, was raised as a New York Jew, a standard Jewish upbringing. He converted to Christianity, and he's now one of the sharpest political commentators on there. And he has especially good insight into Zionism because he grew up with it. And well over a year ago, he produced a video called Trump's Deck of Jewish Cards. Now, he did produce videos sympathetic to Trump as the election drew near. But if you go back to that video, he talks about Trump's background, his connections to the powerful Jewish lawyer Roy Cohn and the necessity of the Trump family dealing with the Jewish powers of New York City in order to make their real estate aggrandizements. And he talked in that video about Carl Icahn and Jared Kushner. He's got a pretty funny exchange. He Brother Nathaniel plays the roles of Trump and Carl Icahn, and Carl Icahn calls up Trump, and Trump says, "Oh, happy Passover, Carl." And Carl Icahn says, "Well, Donald, since it's Passover, I'm forgiving you that debt." Carl Icahn had bailed out, was one of the Jewish bankers who bailed out Trump when his Trump Entertainment went bankrupt. But it's Brother Nathaniel's opinions that Carl Icahn was holding quite a few IOUs, and one of those he called our attention to in that video, which I've tweeted since then, is Trump is the only man to make an advertisement for Israeli television for Benjamin Netanyahu's re-election campaign. And that's a measure of Zionist impact on Trump. The other, of course, is that he called attention to in that particular video, again over a year old, was Jared Kushner. And he pointed out that Trump's daughter Ivanka had converted to Orthodox Judaism to marry into the billionaire Jewish real estate family, the Kushner family. And now we see that he's in the White House. He's now named Carl Icahn was calling Jared Kushner a senior advisor, and Icahn a special advisor. I don't like those nebulous advisors that you see around the president, because it reminds me, Russell, and you're familiar with the whole history of the New World Order. We've seen presidents who had these advisors in the past. Of course, you had Woodrow Wilson, who had an advisor named Edward Mandell House, who lived in the White House, had no cabinet position, but was there watching him like a shadow for Wall Street, for Bernard Baruch, making sure that the Federal Reserve Act got through for the banksters. And after that, you had Franklin D. Roosevelt, who had an advisor with no official position, and that was Harry Hopkins, who also represented Baruch. In fact, an interesting detail of that one is, if you know the story of Pearl Harbor and our foreknowledge of that attack, the Japanese intercepts, which revealed to the Washington administration that Japan was going to attack Pearl Harbor, the head of the translation division in the Navy Department revealed that he had brought those intercepts to Harry Hopkins in a hotel room. So Hopkins and Baruch got to look at those naval intercepts, which our own military commanders in Hawaii were not permitted to see. That's, again, a measure of the power that these bankers have, and they carried out through these advisors. Now, I don't think that a 35-year-old real estate developer is himself calling the shots for Trump, but I think, like House and Hopkins, he may be carrying the message for the banksters, and we see a lot of evidence that Trump is moving in a very heavily pro-Zionist direction. The top advisor to senior advisor Jared Kushner is a man named Abraham Berkowitz, whose first cousin is the former president of AIPAC, which of course is the Israeli lobbying entity here in the United States. And Trump has appointed as ambassador to Israel David Friedman, who is a hardcore pro-settlement guy, even lived in a settlement in Israel, which is a slap in the face to the Palestinians. There's more I want to say about this, but I don't want to just carry on here, so let me throw it back to you.
You know, another interesting thing is the Zionist Organization of America, ZOA, to an American. The Zionist Organization of America at a gala in November said, we're proud to see that Israel will once again enter through the doors of the White House.
And it looks like they're literally doing that with these representatives.
So the ZOA, the Zionist Organization of America, by far gives their overwhelming endorsement to Donald Trump.
Right. You know, I think this is sort of a little bit like Orwell's inner party and outer party. You might remember that there were outer party members who were part of the system, but it was the inner party members who really knew what was going on. And I know that the majority of Jews in America were against Trump, but I think that the inner party members knew that he was on their team. And of course, he has stated that he is going to move the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. This is very important to the Zionists because they have had a long-term plan in their envisionment, the Rothschild envisioning of Greater Israel to rebuild Solomon's temple. And they have actually, there's a big lie out there, which is that the mosque at the Temple Mount is built directly over the remains of Solomon's ancient temple. That is a lie that was planted by a very high-ranking Freemason named Asher Kaufman. It's not true, but it's been done to convince American Christians that if the Israelis go in and you see them getting more aggressive now with Trump as president, that if they go in and try and destroy that mosque, which of course would set the Muslim world on fire, that it's somehow justified biblically. But Trump's intention to move the embassy to Jerusalem is a move towards that. By the way, I just want to mention that not only is this part of the Rothschild vision, but the Bible in 2 Thessalonians warns that the Antichrist, the man of lawlessness, is going to rule from a rebuilt temple, proclaiming himself to be God. This is something we have to be very careful of. This is satanic. This is Luciferian stuff we're talking about here. So very dangerous sign that he wants to do that. And the fact that he is in real estate and that Jared Kushner is in real estate. In fact, Jared Kushner bought the property at 666 Fifth Avenue. It was the biggest real estate deal in history, $1.8 billion for Kushner Properties. And speaking of 666, if you look at the Israeli flag, in between the two blue lines, which represent the Nile and the Euphrates rivers, which is what the Greater Israel is supposed to be, it's what they want to rule from the Euphrates to the Nile, is 666. They've got a six-pointed satanic star with 6 points, 6 triangles, and a six-sided hexagon in there. So you have to wonder if Kushner and Trump aren't part of this plan to rebuild the temple, part of this Luciferian plan, perhaps using their expertise and background in building things.
Oh, that's far out, man. What about Steve Bannon? Have you looked into him?
I know he's considered conservative. He seems to be saying a lot of controversial things, but I also know he's another Zionist, very pro-Israel, as is Michael Flynn at National Security, as is Mike Pence, by the way, and of course Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, and ironically an old Goldman Sachs George Soros fund man. So we're definitely seeing contradictions come in. I like, again, I want to I really commend the president for a lot of the things he's doing. But, I've noticed something, Russell, which is you probably will recall that I've written a book called The Shadows of Power. And I talk about the role of the Council on Foreign Relations in dominating administration after administration, going back to the days of Franklin D. Roosevelt, through every administration, whether you're talking about Carter or Clinton or Gerald Ford or Nixon or Clinton or Bush. You're not seeing a lot of CFR people in there. And I have to wonder but you're seeing a lot of Zionists in there. And I'm wondering if they're saying, okay, we see that the New World Order is not working, that we're not getting the NAFTA to be turned into a North American Union that's been resisted. We see Britain pulling out of the European Union, and Marine Le Pen wants to follow suit in France. And we see this, we wanted to bring this about gradually, but since you guys don't want to do it the easy way, we're going to do it the hard way. I'm concerned there's going to be some kind of a false flag with Israel behind it as usual, some kind of even bigger 9/11 than 9/11 that will move us forward. And I'm concerned that what they're looking at is that Trump will have the military behind him, which Hillary Clinton would not. You may have heard that Trump got a nice standing ovation at the Army-Navy game. He's going to have that resumed confidence of the military behind him, and I'm concerned that Israel is going to get more aggressive. I just saw a tweet about 2 hours ago from someone in Gaza saying that there's a lot of Israeli drones overhead and that it appears that Israel's on the verge of another strike on Gaza. We also know that a week or so ago they bombed Damascus, and it looks like the Israeli military, which we know is very powerful thanks to our tax dollars, is getting very, very bold now that Trump is in there, and they may feel that they can do what they may with him in the White House.
What's your opinion on Obama in all of this? I mean, Obama's gone now, but, America not vetoing the UN Security Council resolution and all of a sudden Israel heating things up. Was Obama suppressing the Zionism over the past 8 years?
He certainly seemed to serve Zionism very well. He continued the Israeli military aid. He increased it. He helped advance the cause of Greater Israel by destroying Libya and trying to destroy Syria. I looked at this and I looked, why is he suddenly taking this hostility towards Russia at the last minute, and people were wondering if he's trying to start World War III to keep Trump out, and suddenly after America never vetoing a UN resolution against Israel, suddenly we don't veto it. And there was even a little aid package to the Palestinians. And, it seems to me possibly that what we're looking at here, Russell, was more psychology than anything else. There's been excellent articles written by F. William Engdahl about how Kissinger is operating on the quietly within the Trump administration to recreate a balance of power. And just give me a moment here, and I'll explain what I mean by this. It'll explain what I think Obama was doing. What Engdahl says, and he has some pretty good analysis, that Kissinger in the past, when Russia got to be too strong, that's when he made the move towards building up China as a counterbalance. The New World Order doesn't want any one power getting too strong. And apparently, recently, China's been getting too strong. And according to Engdahl, what Kissinger wants and the New World Order wants is for Russia to split with China, to split up the BRICS. And so the idea is to have Trump warm up to Russia while being cool to China. We do see him doing that. He's being warm towards Putin and he's being cool towards China. You probably recall the phone call he made to the president of Taiwan, which ticked off the Chinese. He's complained about Chinese steel, and he seems to be following that Kissinger plan. And I have to wonder if those moves by Obama, sending a division, or it wasn't a division, it was less than a division, but sending troops to the Polish border and sending home 35 Russian diplomats was not going to start World War III, but it might have made the Russians tense about that. And maybe these moves by Obama were psychologically meant to help the transition, so when Trump came to power, Russia would welcome him with open arms and go along with this division of power with China. Although I think Putin's too smart for that. And perhaps this sudden turnaround against Israel at the last minute by Obama was not because he's really suddenly turned against AIPAC, but maybe it was to send a message to the Jewish state and to the Zionists that now you can really feel bolder because now you've got a true friend moving in with you. Maybe it's all part of a psychological move, that they're not going to try to slow approach the New World Order anymore by, the regional unions and so forth. Maybe they're going to move towards a world war, and they think that Trump is the man to do that.
How many generals now in the cabinet?
That's part of it. You look at that and you see we have General Flynn at National Security and General Kelly at Homeland Security. And we've got, it's not the first time we've had a general at Secretary of State. George Marshall was at Secretary of State. But we've got Mad Dog Mattis. Seems an awfully strange choice for Defense Secretary. You put that together with Trump's calls for a even bigger military budget and more nukes, and it certainly seems like we've got a pro-war cabinet there.
Do you think it's possible that Trump is a puppet for Pence?
I've heard that theorized. After all, many people believe that was the case with Cheney and Bush, that Cheney, of course, was a true insider. He was the CFR man. And
you can go before that. You can go Bush and Reagan.
Bush and Reagan. You could even go back. Quite often, it's the number two man who calls the shots. I'll give you a classic example is when they formed the Federal Reserve. Paul Warburg, who planned the whole thing, was made the vice chairman, not the chairman. It would have been a little too obvious. That quite often it's the number two man who's calling the shots. When we got into the Spanish-American War, it was the Assistant Secretary of the Navy, Teddy Roosevelt, who was really calling the shots and sent the fleet to Manila to attack the Spanish fleet there and was gung-ho for war. Quite often it's the number two man. You might be right, but Pence doesn't seem like the sly Cheney type. He seems like a sincere guy, but I would need to know more. I don't know if that's part of the strategy or not, but it's worth considering.
Are there any other connections to Zionism you've researched?
Well, another one that bothered me a lot was his inauguration speech. He was introduced by Chuck Schumer, of course, who was a Jewish senator. And then during the inauguration speech, the only enemy he mentioned was Islamic extremism. Not that I'm in favor of Islamic extremism. As I mentioned, I'm certainly against this tide of immigration, which is destroying Europe and threatens to destroy us. But of course, we were the ones who were really responsible for those wars, fighting for non-existent weapons of mass destruction, blaming the wrong person with sarin gas, etc. But after the inaugural speech, the first man to speak was Rabbi Marvin Heyer, who is the founder of the Simon Wiesenthal Center, sending the, Holocaust message to the listeners. And Heyer said nothing about Trump. He said nothing about America at all. He simply quoted Psalm 137 saying, by the rivers of Babylon, we wept as we remembered Zion. So this seemed to be like a clear message to the Zionist community, to me, that because no Orthodox rabbi had ever given an invocation. Now, there were two Christians who followed him, but he was given first place. And again, he was also introduced, Trump was, by a Jewish senator. And by the way, I'm half Jewish myself. You and I are not anti-Semites, but we are against Zionism. And we know that the Rothschilds have been fighting to create this greater Israel as the capital of this new world order. That's what it's really all about. So I'm concerned about that. Another thing Trump said just recently says that we have to build a missile defense system. He said we need it against Iran. And as far as I know, Iran doesn't even have any missiles to defend against. So again, we see this sort of warlike attitude towards Iran. And plus, he's invited Netanyahu to visit the White House this month. So a lot of signals. I don't know that I'm leaving anything major out. But there is a video out there on YouTube. It's called Trump is the Swamp by Truth Media Revolution, which actually lists all the Zionists around Trump. And a lot of them are not necessarily in an official cabinet position, but they're in an advisory position or part of the transition team. And it's pretty amazing how many Zionists are included on the list. Again, that's called Trump is the Swamp. I'm not saying myself Trump is the Swamp. I like a lot that the man is doing. I supported him against Hillary Clinton. I am concerned, though, against what you and I agree is a warlike-looking cabinet and these multiple Zionist connections. And I'd like to think that maybe the man is to himself, because nobody knows a man's private thoughts, to himself, that he is privately not going to support a pro-Israel, pro-Zionist war, and that he's just been playing a game with them. But that hasn't happened too many times in history, but it can. So I think we need to, pray that we will avoid a world war and we will avoid any kind of trickery by Israel in the way of another 9/11. I'm very encouraged by what I see happening in Russia right now, that we consider that as a potential subject. We won't get into that tonight, but my latest blog post is about how America and Russia have virtually reversed roles since the deepest part of the Cold War, with Russia becoming a Christian nation with a tremendous Christian revival under Russian Orthodoxy, and a president who's really talking a lot of sense. And I hope that our president will talk sense and that we will see peace prevail, and that Trump will fulfill that pledge and America will become great again without going to war.
Trump Towers, they're going to stay Trump Towers, but all the new buildings are going to be named Scion. S-C-I-O-N.
I hadn't heard that, but of course it sounds awfully close to Zion.
Trump Hotels chief executive officer says 17 deals in the works for the new Scion brand. Not Trump. They don't want to connect the Trump brand, but they're using Scion. And you can't deny that sounds just like Zion.
Right. I suppose they could say that now that he's president, they need to avoid any appearance of conflict of interest by using the president's name in their building. But Why have a name that is so close to Zion? I wouldn't if it was just one thing, Russell, I wouldn't be concerned. But when you put all these connections together, it does become concerning. The AIPAC is still calling the shots for the White House.
Well, there you go. Well, I'm sure we'll keep an eye on it, and well, you more so than me.
Well, my last articles, one of them we did discuss was one on 9/11 being a nuclear event. The last one is on Putin and Russia and what's happening there. And I believe my next post probably will be looking at the Trump administration and just as we've done tonight, looking at the positives and also looking with concern at these Zionist connections. I say concern because we know what Zionism has brought the world historically.
Let me ask you, are you still bullish on Donald Trump?
I can't say bullish or bearish. It's kind of like asking a stock market guy. We're gonna have a bull market this year or a bear market, and most of them will hedge, and I have to hedge for the very reasons we've been discussing tonight, which is I've seen a lot of positives from Trump, fulfilling pledges, doing things that are good. And at the same time, this worrying connection to Netanyahu and Israel, which is seems to be emboldening the Israelis right now. And I am definitely concerned about war. So I could not say I'm bullish on Trump. I'm bullish for what he's doing that's good.
What is your opinion on the so-called Muslim ban?
Well, it appears to be within the laws that are existing already. Somebody made a very and I think the media is overreacting to it. Of course, if from my perspective, these terrorist incidents are not the result of Muslim immigration, but the results of, well, you can just take. There's a CIA officer who's been talking about this. Trying to remember his name now. He's been on InfoWars.
Steve Pachanik?
No, it's another guy. But he's a former CIA officer who's pointed out, who stated that every major mass shooting terrorist event in America has been done, either implemented by American intelligence services or has been provoked by them, referring to, Boston Marathon, etc. And, it's Steele. I believe it's Robert Steele, a former CIA officer. And so I'm not concerned about false flag shootings being implemented by Muslims as I am by Israeli or Gladio or our own intelligence services. But as far as that ban goes, somebody made an interesting observation that the 7 countries he banned are virtually identical to the 7 countries that General Wesley Clark said that in 2001 the Pentagon already had a plan to take out, which is a pretty interesting coincidence. I think the only one not on Clark's list is Yemen. And Yemen, of course, has been undergoing tremendous suffering at the hands of Saudi Arabia with American and UK weapons.
Yet Pakistan and Saudi Arabia weren't on the list.
Right. And I'd love to see Israel put on that list. I made a meme of of President Bush when he said we shall pursue these terrorists into any nation that protects them. And then I've got a reporter asking him, "Oh, great, Mr. President, when do you plan to invade Israel?" Because we all know about the dancing Israelis and the innumerable Israeli connections to 9/11. If there was truth in his statement, that's who we would have gone after instead of boosting their military budget.
You mentioned The Shadows of Power. The other great book is Truth is a Lonely Warrior. Where can the audience find the books and get in contact with you?
And my website is jamesperloff.com. My name is spelled P as in Peter, E-R-L-O-F-F. And you can get my books. You can read about the books on the website, but they are all on Amazon. And the latest one is Truth is a Lonely Warrior. That is a primer on the New World Order, everything from the false flags to the vaccines to chemtrails and Zionism and Freemasonry and media control and environmentalism as a pretext for controlling populations, the whole history of the communist revolution, et cetera, et cetera. It's from A to Z, but I keep updating through my website, and people can go there for the most up-to-date information that I'm able to try to research and provide, hopefully for the edification of people and for their freedom because this New World Order has been pretty monolithic and has been growing for a long time. And people need to get out of the mainstream media matrix and onto shows like the Russell Scott Show and the rest of the alt media into the blue pill world where they can find out what's really going on, because the people who run the mainstream media, as we know, are the same people who run the government and the Fed.
James Perloff, once again, thank you so much for being a guest on the program.
Well, Russell, thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for continuing to run your show all these years, and I wish you the greatest success and hope to be part of your show on an ongoing basis.
I'm sure you'll be on again very soon. Thank you so much, James.
Thank you, Russell.